Makes a mess. Try to get some background lighting here. A bit better. Okay. All right, chapter 16. 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Losing and winning a fight. Well, that feels like a story of my life. Okay. The remaining 2 weeks before the big superstar tournament seemed to last an eternity for Daniel. Though he tried to tell his family and friends that he would get a real rank soon, no one seemed to believe him, and he wasn't really sure of it himself. Nothing seemed certain to him since the moment he had traveled through the big board. He found himself worrying about the point system much of the time. Since getting a rank depended on him passing the Cobra Club initiation test, Daniel worried about that too. Like all the other kids in town, Barry and the boys on the team worried about making superstar status. The Rockets won all their games, but the final team they had would play, the Wildcats, were also undefeated. Every game was filled with the same war cry: smash him, blast him, kill him, get the ball, score, score, score. Every player was just trying to survive. Barry was already bragging about where he would put the superstar trophy in his room. Daniel asked the president of the Cobra Club how he could be so sure, but Barry would only smile. His new and improved smile. Barry was also the only one who seemed to think Daniel would soon be rid of his rank blank status. Don't have anything to drink, darn it. Ever since the bank had closed, most people in Centerville had grown more worried too. Doug Barnes' whole family had moved away from town because Doug's parents had lost both their jobs. The same thing was happening to many other families. In the middle of all the change and turmoil, people wanted to know where they stood. The big board down in Mrs. Happy's store became a regular gathering place. Within just 3 weeks, it seemed as if the mysterious big board had always been there, adding and subtracting points like a computerized fortune-telling machine. Though people often complained about losing points, fewer and fewer people complained about the big board itself. The concerned group of parents that had come to Mrs. Happy that first week dwindled in size. Sheriff Kramer continued to express his displeasure about the big board, but most of the other parents got in line and just encouraged their children to try harder to measure up. The big board out at the factory, I'm going to lower it a little bit. Looks like I haven't seen it buffer or stop. Come on. A little bit too much. Look down, lift it up. The big board out of the factory only increased the power of the point system in town. Though adults were graded on an adult level 1, the bigger big board worked essentially the same way. In fact, those adults in town who didn't work at the factory began to feel left out since they didn't have number cards and rank in the overall picture. Some of the more successful business people really wished that they could compare ranks down at the barber shop and the beauty parlor like the factory workers did. Near the end of August, the town council began talking with the representative of Goliath Industries about how they could purchase various big boards for the rest of the people in town. I should have a water bottle around here somewhere. I may take a break and get some water. Wait a minute, I had a tea. Daniel felt the pull of the point system tugging at his own heart, day in and day out. The longer he was ranked blank, the more desperate he was to see his name in lights on the big board like all the other children. Being on the outside of the point system wore him down. If he could have talked with Susan or John Kramer, he might not have felt so isolated, but they were still out of town and it seemed like they had been gone an eternity. He began to wonder if they were ever coming back, and even if they did come back, he wasn't sure he wanted them for his friends. He's in danger of selling out. Who you had as friends was an important category in the point breakdown sheet. If you had friends with a good rank, you were credited more points yourself, so everyone wanted top 100 kids as their friends. But the higher number kids tried to stick with the other higher numbers, and on down the line it went. The children divided the town into general classifications: the Big 10, the top 100, the mids, numbers 200 through 300, and the so-sos, 300 through 400, and the low balls, the 5 and 600s. Then there were the oddballs like Daniel who were ranked blank. Though no one was sure, the word had spread around town that the Kramer children were all ranked blanks too, but they had never even been to the big board to have it confirmed. Daniel felt sure that he would be ranked blank just like they would be ranked blank just like him, since they all rode Spirit Flyers. Though he thought of Susan almost every day, he wondered if things would ever work out. He felt that if he hung out with the other ranked blank kids, he himself would be considered a ranked blank forever. The more he thought about this, the more desperate he became to break into this point system. Big mistake, Daniel. Daniel's attitude about the Spirit Flyer began to change too. Ever since he had signed a loyalty from a Mrs. Happy store, he wished for the dreamlike #1 status he had seen when he rode through the big board on the Super Wings. The more he rode the Super Wings, the less he remembered the good times he used to have riding the Spirit Flyer. After 3 weeks, he didn't miss the old bicycle much at all. In fact, he had begun even to resent the old bike. He was out in the garage one morning staring at the Spirit Flyer. It was on a Thursday, the last week of August, the day before the super summer party. Barry and the other boys were planning to come over. Daniel was excited because Barry was finally going to give him the rules for passing his initiation test. I might not finish this chapter. Oh man. One. Daniel hoped they wouldn't talk about the Spirit Flyer. The last several times they had come to his house, they had said a lot of mean things about the old bike. Daniel had become sensitive about even letting them in the garage anymore. In fact, he had taken an old blanket and covered the Spirit Flyer to make it less noticeable. The old bicycle was beginning to be just an embarrassment to the boy, just like his limping leg. I can't do much about my leg, Daniel said aloud to himself, but I don't guess I really need 2 bicycles. I can only ride one anyway. Besides, I would have a rank on the big board a long time ago if it wasn't for you. Everyone likes my Super Wings bike, but no one likes a junkie bike. So the old Spirit Flyer sat quietly on its big balloon tires. Daniel pulled the blanket back down over it. He took the plastic number card out of his pocket. He stared down at the reflected image within the card. The image began to grin at Daniel. Then for a moment, Daniel thought he heard a voice. The lips on his reflection were moving. Just admit it, the face in the card said, and then giggled. You hate the Spirit Flyer and you want to get rid of it. You'll never be accepted by any other kids as long as you have that junkie bicycle. It doesn't matter what rank you are. You're probably right, Daniel agreed with himself. He felt a tremendous heaviness on his neck and shoulders. Then he saw the chain in the reflection on the card. The mysterious chain didn't even surprise him anymore. The chain hurts, the reflection said, but that's because you're resisting it. You're like a dog pulling on a leash, but it wouldn't hurt if you went where the chain wanted you to go. That makes sense, Daniel said to himself inside. That junkie bicycle is pulling you down, the reflection said. Your mother knows that, your friends know that. The big board knows it, and even the whole town knows it. You're the only dummy left. So why don't you get back in the game? Get rid of the Spirit Flyer. Everyone thinks you're an oddball enough as it is. Pretty soon everyone will think you are a regular fanatic if you keep that old bike. Think about that, stupid. And with those words, the reflection of Daniel's face froze into silence. Daniel put the card back into his pocket. That's when he saw the Cobra Club coming up the street. The boys in the Cobra Club were yelling as they rode up into Daniel's driveway. A new boy had been asked to join since Doug Barnes had left the town. His name was Jason Miller. Daniel didn't really like Jason all that much because Jason was always wanting to pick a fight. Daniel just thought he was trying to prove himself. He was going to be included in the same initiation test as Daniel. Neither boy liked the idea of having to depend on the other. Jason had even complained out loud in front of Daniel. "Why do I have to get stuck with this cripple?" Jason had said. "What if we need to run or something? I like to work alone." Daniel had gotten red in his face. He had been ready to sail into Jason with both fists, but didn't. Then he felt ashamed because he could tell the other boys in the club had wanted to see their newest two members fight it out. Jason was a little bigger than Daniel. He was also a rough boy with a bad temper. He had dirty hands and a wild look in his eyes. His hair was always a mess and his clothes weren't as nice as Daniel's clothes. Daniel was afraid of him. Ever since that day, Daniel had just tried to stay out of Jason's way. But he had wondered if that would be possible if they had to go out together on the initiation test. "Tonight is a big night," Barry said with a smile. The president of the Cobra Club was holding a large grocery sack under one arm. "What do I have to do?" Jason demanded as he hopped off his bike. He totally ignored Daniel. "Both you and Daniel have to work as a team on this one," Barry said. "That's really great," Jason fumed. "I told you I can handle it by myself." "It will be better for everyone if you do it together," Barry said. In fact, I'll be going along to keep watch." The boys crowded up into a small circle as Barry opened a large shopping bag. There were 2 rolls of toilet paper, a can of shaving cream, and a plain paper sack about the size of a 10-pound bag of flour. "What's the mission?" Jason asked, but he didn't seem too impressed with the items Barry was showing them. "We may not be invited to the top 100 party that Craig and Cindy are giving tomorrow, but I plan to attend it one night early." The president of the Cobra Club smiled. "In fact, I plan to help them decorate to show my appreciation. And after we're through decorating, they may not even want to have a party." "With that junk," Jason asked, "you can't do much with a couple rolls of toilet paper and shaving cream. Need some spray paint or stuff like that." "What's in the sack?" Daniel asked, looking at the mystery package. He figured that must be Barry's secret weapon. "That's for me to know and you to find out tomorrow," Barry said. "Are you in or not?" "I'm in," Jason said immediately, "but I can handle myself. I don't need some limp-legged creep slowing me down all night." Daniel felt himself turn red. The boys in the club looked eagerly back and forth between the two opponents, hoping for a fight. Jason looked at Daniel with disgust. "You both are going," Barry said. "We may need to spread the credit around on this one." "It's your club," Jason sniffed. When are we supposed to get there?" "We'll meet at midnight at the edge of the town park, right there by the entrance into the pool parking lot." "Midnight?" Daniel asked. "I'm not sure I can get out of the home that late in the night." "You either must be there or you fail the test," Barry snapped impatiently. "What if the little baby can't get out of his house?" Jason taunted. "I told you it was a mistake to bring him." Daniel felt the wave of heat and anger rush over himself. Jason stood up and stretched. Daniel stood and faced him. "So the cripple wants to fight me?" Jason asked. "You better get your little sister for help." "I'm warning you," Daniel said. "Watch what you say around me." Jason smiled at the other boys. Daniel took a step closer. His hands were in fists. Jason looked at the other boys and then turned to Daniel. As he turned, he spat right into Daniel's face. Daniel cried out as he lunged forward, and in a second both boys were rolling on the front lawn, clawing and punching at each other. Jason was laughing, which only made Daniel more angry. The boys cheered. The other boys cheered them on. Only Barry watched without speaking. Daniel took most of the blows at first, but when he tasted blood on his lips, something seemed to come over him. All the pent-up rage and shame that he had taken since the accident seemed to explode. Daniel's arms began flailing like a windmill in a tornado. Soon he was on top of Jason. He just kept hitting and hitting. His eyes were filled with tears. He could hardly see what he was hitting, but he could tell by the cries that Jason was hurting. Daniel was still swinging when the boys of the club grabbed his arms. It took 2 boys for each arm to keep Daniel from landing another blow. Jason was crawling on the ground trying to get away, but his lips and nose were bleeding. Grass stuck in his dirty hair, and his eyes were full of fear as he looked up at Daniel. "Did you see that?" Alvin whispered. The younger boy with the big nose looked at Daniel with awe and new respect. Daniel's chest was rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. "He would have killed me," Jason blubbered out. "He fights like a crazy man. It ain't fair." "He made you look like a wimp," Jimmy commented and spat on the ground. Jason looked down, wiping the blood from his nose. "Way to go, Danny," Barry said and patted Daniel on the back. "You'll get credit on the big board for sure, winning a fight like that." Daniel stared over at Jason. Then he began brushing off his clothes. He felt like an animal. Part of him wanted to feel good for winning the fight, but he only felt sick inside. He knew you were supposed to feel brave and glorious, but he just felt worse. "I better go," Daniel said. Sure thing, Barry said. You really nailed him, Jimmy added. Did you guys see that? The other boys began to laugh. The tension was gone from the air, but it wasn't gone from Daniel's stomach. He held his side, trying to hold it all under control. You'll still be there tonight, won't you? Barry asked Daniel. I'll be there, Daniel replied, and he knew he would. The boys were still talking as he walked back through the garage. As he closed the big garage door, Daniel saw the blanket over his Spirit Flyer. He looked sadly over at the old bicycle. Everything was sick and confused inside him. For a moment, all he wished for was to leap on the old seat of the bicycle and fly away into the clouds. But the thought of the loyalty from form he had signed, came rushing back in. Daniel turned away from the bike and limped into the house. End of the chapter. Yay! Oh my gosh. Don't have chains around your neck. Let's go see what's going on outside. All right, God bless everybody. Bye-bye. It didn't buffer or stop. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. All right, good night.